Chuck. And then comes Cosmo, and it's a bunched unit turning for home in the Los Alamitos Derby. It's Uncle Chuck, 1,000 Words throwing out a challenge. Great Power back to third. Cosmo battles on. They have 3/16 left to go, and it's Uncle Chuck by 1 length. 1,000 Words is trying hard to get on terms, but Uncle Chuck has the lead. He's clear. He's increasing his margin coming past the 16th pole. Uncle Chuck racing away from 1,000 Words. Uncle Chuck by 3. 1,000 Words second. Cosmo was 6 away third, then Great Power.
Okay, so like I mentioned in our first preview of the Travers Stakes, we would be back with our friend Jay Privman from the Daily Racing Forum. So to not delay any longer, we've got Jay here. So how are you doing today, Jay?
Good, Jack. How are you?
Could be better, but we do have the Travers this weekend, and seems like a theme of when we have you on, we're talking about Tiz the Law, and just not to spend too much time on him because there's not much that can be said about him that hasn't already been said. But what did you think of the effort that he had the Belmont Stakes?
Thoroughly professional effort. He looked like the best horse going in. He had a good post position draw. Was able to get a nice clean trip from where he was at, and won his best, and has continued to hold his form at a top level all year long. So I thought it was the kind of effort we've come to expect from him as a 3-year-old.
Now, there's a couple other intriguing horses in here. Obviously, the one that everyone's going to look at is the Bob Baffert runner here, Uncle Chuck. He is coming into this race off of a win in the Los Alamitos Derby, and I would say at least the one, I don't want to say it's a knock because I feel like it's a nitpick for him. He looked really good in the Los Alamitos Derby, but if you were to run him up against a Tiz the Law, he isn't necessarily battle tested. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have the talent to run a really nice race here in the Travers. What would you say about him coming into here?
I think that's a good assessment. He is not battle tested. He's obviously never run against a horse like Tiz the Law before, but he's only run 2 times. And I think to have won first time out going a mile and then come back and in his second start running a 1 1/8 stake race, and to win both those races and win them both comfortably, really shows that he's got a tremendous amount of raw talent. And then you combine the fact that the horse that he beat in the Los Alamitos Derby, 1,000 Words, came back and won the Shared Belief last weekend at Del Mar, beating Honor AP. The form of that race looks pretty strong, and Uncle Chuck has certainly trained like a top-class horse here at Del Mar in the weeks since the Los Alamitos Derby. So I think he's an extremely talented horse, but he's obviously taking the worst of it from an experience standpoint. He's shipping cross-country as well, and he's taking on the best 3-year-old in the country all year long in Tiz the Law. So it's a tough assignment, but the raw talent's there. I'm convinced he will run a very good race.
And in kind of a setting where the Kentucky Derby points are not necessarily the most crucial for him with the setup, even if we do get a full 20 field, probably just at the minimum, a third-place effort for him would do the trick. Getting to another formful race, obviously talking about the Belmont Stakes, we already mentioned Tiz the Law, but looking at the third-place finisher from the Belmont is in here, Max Player, and there were some questions of whether or not he would have the talent to mix it up with some of the other horses in that Belmont, but he proved himself in that race and ran another credible third behind Tiz the Law, and obviously a horse, Dr. Post, who was a nice stakes winner down at Gulfstream, and I say ran a credible third with a viable excuse in the Haskell.
I would agree with that assessment of Dr. Post, but yeah, getting back to Max Player, I always thought he was kind of a cut below this group earlier this year, and then obviously owing to the pandemic, he had to have a fairly extensive layoff coming into the Belmont Stakes, but I thought that was by far his best performance so far this year, and an improvement over what he had done earlier in the year. So if he can continue to make another forward move now, a month and a half or so since the Belmont was run, he could certainly continue on that upward trajectory, and it's just a matter of will he run back to as well as he did in the Belmont. But I thought that was a very encouraging step forward for him.
Another horse that has the question of can he run back to what could probably be assessed as his best race is the 5 Chivalry. Everyone remembers the Florida Derby that he kind of had a very similar trip to a horse, Bodie Express, who ran second to Maximum Security in the Florida Derby last year. Chivalry had a big number, had a very similar trip, and wound up finishing second to Tis the Law. Would you say that it would be fair to say that he would have to run back up to that Florida Derby effort to be able to not necessarily win this race, because I don't think he's a win contender, but to get a piece of a second or a third in this race?
Yeah, he would have to certainly run back to that. I just don't know that he's capable of doing that. I don't think he wants any part of a mile and a quarter. And I think at Gulfstream, he was certainly helped by a track profile that tends to favor forwardly placed horses. Now, Saratoga has tended to favor forwardly placed horses so far this meet, but I think the distance of this race is really going to be challenging for Chivalry. The Florida Derby was at a mile and an eighth, and the last time he ran a mile and an eighth, and he didn't run well at all in the bluegrass. And I think going out to a mile and a quarter is not going to be as beneficial to him as it will be to horses like Tis the Law and Uncle Chuck.
It feels weird to say this about the Peter Pan Stakes, because normally the race you would be talking about horses coming out of a particular race and then running in the Travers would be the Jim Dandy, but obviously with the pandemic shifting races around, the Peter Pan kind of served as the Jim Dandy-esque race of this year. And we've got the 1-2 finishers here, Country Grammar and Caro Caro, who I thought Caro Caro coming out, or looking back at the Peter Pan, Caro Caro may have been, he was coming into that race off of a fairly sizable layoff, and he ran second behind Country Grammar. I felt that maybe, on pure talent, Caro Caro may have been the better horse in that race. What do you think of the two horses coming out of the Peter Pan, Country Grammar and Caro Caro?
So Caro Caro, I agree with you, ran a tremendous race last time. I mean, hadn't run in 6 months, and it was only his third start. It was a remarkable performance. My concern with him in the Travers is, has he recovered enough from an effort like that off of a long layoff on, fairly short rest. It's not like it's a 1 week turnaround, but relatively speaking, it's shorter. It's short in comparison to the time he had off coming into that last race. And sometimes horses can regress when they've had a big effort off of an extended layoff and they come back a little too quick. So that would be my concern with him. Country Grammar is a horse that there were some fairly decent hopes for earlier this year when he ran in the Fountain of Youth. I had talked to Chad Brown that week about the horse. I was down in Florida, and his hope was to get a good race into him, but realized he was a little behind with them, but thought that off that race he could move forward and then run in the Wood Memorial, which at that point was going to be run on April the 4th. And if he ran well there, go on to the Kentucky Derby. Well, obviously, after the Fountain of Youth and racing being suspended in New York, Country Grammar didn't get a chance to run for quite a while. But now he's come back, and he's had some good performances. And I think he's a horse who's got a chance to continue to progress. Having watched tapes of his works, he seems like he's kind of a lazy workhorse, and it's hard for me to just sort of gauge where he's at, but I don't think he'll be as affected by the shorter turnaround, for the Jim Dandy horses as opposed to the Belmont horses. I don't think he'll be as affected by it as Caro Caro would be.
And the final two horses in this race could be fairly assessed as the two outside chances. First Line is coming into this race off of breaking his maiden in his 4th try, and he will be coming into the Travers off of a fairly quick turnaround. And also South Bend, who in his most recent effort was second in the Ohio Derby. What would you say would be your assessment of those other two horses?
Well, First Line seems like they're really taking a shot here, but his trainer seemingly can do no wrong this meet, so maybe he'll outrun his odds. But he's hard for me to back seriously based on form so far. South Bend is, I think, a cut below the best of this division, but he ran a decent race last time, and well enough that he was privately purchased out of that race by new owners who turned him over to Bill Mott, and that's who he's going to be making his first start for. So there's a chance that this horse might be continuing to make some incremental progress, but he's going to have to move up quite a bit off what we've seen so far for him to have a chance against the top two in here.
So that is just a very brief look at the Travers with our friend Jay Privman. We appreciate him coming on, and we will see him next time in a couple of weeks for the Kentucky Derby. Again, if you haven't checked out our Travers preview, myself and my co-host, go check that out, and we will see you come Kentucky Derby time with Jay Privman back on.
Tis the Law now to take over. It's Tis the Law in front in the stretch, and there's an eighth of a mile to the finish. Dr. Post moves up on the outside into second, but it is Tis the Law, and the New York bred is going to win New York's Belmont Stakes, the first leg of the 2020 Triple Crown.